Let's look at our first conversation now. Major issues impacting Nigeria now. We see inflation driven by rising energy costs, food inflation. But one thing seems to be a driver of both food and energy prices: insecurity. How does Nigeria crush this insecurity issue that's, breeding oil theft and chasing farmers away from the farms? Joining me now for this conversation, we have Mr. Adebayo Adeleke. He's the founder of Root Watch. Joining me right here in the studio. Great to have you.
Good morning, laddie. It's been great to be back here.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's been a while, you've been on the show, and a lot has happened.
Absolutely.
Since last time you came, we've seen food inflation. Even though, it's tending downward, we're still seeing it, elevated. If you look at the data from last month, you see that food inflation has left that 40% level, which is good, but it's still elevated. Prices are still high, at this point. Then we see energy prices. We're seeing the whole talk about oil theft. And, looking at everything, is the security situation improving in some kind of way in Nigeria? And if not, has Nigeria ever been this insecure, where it's affecting food and energy?
Thanks for asking that question. It's quite of a loaded question a bit. Is Nigeria be this insecure? I would say with data, I think yes, over the course of time. Because if you look at it, of course, we look back in time and says like, you know what, we've never been this worse, but we've never really looked into the data and all the factors affecting insecurity over the course of time. And oftentimes, what we're experiencing now is the inaction that has happened over the last 20 or 30 years. So if you look at it, as Nigeria, we've never been insecure. We have always been insecure. But this much, probably not. It's all about, you have to put it in context and in relative. But you've talked about, food prices dropping. It's expected. If you look at what's going on globally, it's not only Nigeria alone. Most of the countries are reporting inflation drop. The United States has dropped in the percentages as well. And we continue to see these things actually cascade into different countries, both developed and undeveloped countries. But one thing still remains: insecurity is the bane of most of all our, food, trying to move from food insecurity to food security. But one of the things, all the metrics, all the different domains that we've collected data over the course of time, insecurity has ranked top one or two factors actually affecting, either from food inflation, food scarcity, food agricultural production or whatnot. Insecurity has always been, and you and I will talk more. I think in our pre-show conversation, I share some ideas with you, but I'll let you go into it and I will share more insight.
And definitely you have some data out that's Root Watch, and you did break down, the risk level in some states. And, from this, we see the likes of Borno, Katsina, Kaduna, Niger. These two, they're high risk.
Absolutely.
From previous of 74 points to 83, that's for Borno State, ranked 37. Not much for the month-on-month change, but this is showing how risky most of these states. Talk to me about this date.
So on September 11, we did something that hasn't been done before. We produced the Nigeria Security Index, which oftentimes, and I'll tell you a bit, if the time allows me to tell you why we actually arrive at this. Over the course of time, we have been on the receiving end of people kind of defining what Nigeria is from security point of view. But actually, try not to be insensitive. We are bad, but we're not that bad, ideally. So we kind of look at what is the construct of security. How are we looking at security, and in what lens, from what perspective have we been looking at security? Nigeria is not monolithic in any shape or form. You cannot subject the whole country of over 200 million to an action that only about less than 5% of the population is experiencing, and then you term the whole country as being infested with terrorism or different banditry and whatnot. So that's why we kind of look at it from the subnational level to be able to categorize what is really going on in Nigeria. We kind of look at that magnifying lens and look at each state as we look at it. And Borno and Katsina has been experiencing over the course of time. So what we did, we look at the last 10 years, until the month of June, by the way. That's how we did it. So we look at the last 10 years and we look at June 2023 to June 2024. what has really been going on, and we look at the ways of nothing is really static. It's very, moving in very wavy in any shape, some kind of weird shape like that. But one thing that's been consistent with Borno State that we've seen with the, Boko Haram, with banditry and whatnot is going on over there. So it's quite a reflective. Data is reality, and this one is one of them. And we begin to see what's going on in Kaduna as well, as we've seen historically. I mean, what we've been reported in the news, both primary and secondary data shows the same as such. And then Niger. Now, very interesting, Niger is the biggest state in Nigeria, and also is the farmland as well. So this thing is actually quite important as we continue to look at how do we move from food insecurity to food security? We have to look at, the grains belt, the tuber belt of Nigeria, because if you look at Nigerian food system, it's tuber and grain based. So how is insecurity affecting the grain belt? How is food security affecting the tuber belt? And then you begin to see, the data will start speaking to you.
Because I remember when, yam, tuber of yam, at some point,
about 7,000 naira.
About 7,000 naira for one tuber.
Absolutely.
And when one of these sellers told me that price, I just said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to buy it. At this point, it's really expensive. Just one tuber. How many of the family is that going to feed?
Yeah, and
we're seeing all of that.
And one of our research, actually, funny enough, and I'll show you the story. One of our research, in Yoruba traditional marriage rite is to provide 42 tubers of yam to the bride's family.
That's a fortune. It's
a fortune. I actually became contentious in one family. Like, why will I provide you 42 tubers of yam when each of them is about 7,000 naira? What kind of food? It was very interesting when you look at those reports as we went to the field to gather those data. So it become contentious. Not only that, and at that singular event actually not only tells us about how significant this food inflation price is. It really, went as far as affecting some of our cultural norms as well.
Right. So, those trying to get married traditionally, definitely the costs.
Exactly.
Traditional marriage.
Exactly.
Also rising because of this.
Exactly.
Then you also looked at it from a national level, that you took the whole of Nigeria, not just, the subnational level. And you did come up with this score. I think the score was about in the 20s, region, if you can put that up for me. But these are other states,
Yes.
But on a national level, if you look at the national data, we see that there's been some kind of, it looks good, when you look at it,
Yeah, so if you look at it,
the national level,
exactly. If you look at the national level, we're moderate risk.
Exactly,
moderate risk, because you cannot tell me that people in Borno, they're experiencing the same reaction when it comes to the issue of insecurity to the people of Lagos. If what is going on in Borno happens in Lagos, it's a completely different it will be completely different scenario as we view Nigeria. So Nigeria in its own entirety, different state governors are tackling insecurity differently. Jigawa, for example, they've been doing some marvelous work over there. How they've been able to actually employ the youths and employ the population and getting them into agriculture, to actually lower their security factor. Exactly, security risk factor. And some other states as well. Cross River has been the lowest of all states as we continue to move the southwestern state, with the insertion of Amotekun as well. But also there are some other programs as well that they are using. We call it the non-kinetic programs that are using. As I explained to you over the course of time, is that when we talk about security in Nigeria, ourselves, Nigerians, and the world at large have been programmed to define security from just law enforcement and military perspective. But security is quite deeper than that, because there are several expressions of security. If you look at it for national security, border security, economic security, energy security, there's so many expressions of security. But to really want to get to the bane of this whole thing, you have to look at it like, for Nigeria to really solve this problem of insecurity, the military and the law enforcement is the last stop. That all the MDAs in Nigeria, each and every one of them has what we call the line of effort, the non-kinetic line of effort that directly affects security. As I explained to you, what is going on in Jigawa. Jigawa used something different to be able to tackle their own security, and they saw the result. Imagine all the MDAs now contributing in different, affecting the economy, agricultural production, is it data production and everything. We begin to see the shift in how we term what we see and the activities we see from the security perspective. And the last one, if there's still, after every MDA has contributed from their own non-kinetic line of effort, anyone that is still hanging out there, will call them radicals and let the military and the law enforcement go out there and wipe them out. That is how you affect security and how you improve security, either at the community level, either at the state and regional level and national level as well.
Right, and definitely you did mention the non-kinetic measures at this time, but talk to me about technology now. How much technology is really playing into our security, at this point? And we've been talking about funding.
Yes.
Funding.
Yes.
Defense funding. We've heard some quarters say it's not enough. Some say we're spending a lot, when it comes to defense. So let me marry that, technology and spending.
So I'm glad you asked it. Root Watch, we've been working intensely on the Root Watch intelligence side. And also in the upcoming weeks, we're going to be releasing the Food Security Index, the first from Nigeria, about how we view food security. And what I can tell you, categorically speaking, I haven't been on the field for the last 4 months, about both on the food security side and the physical and community security side. Technology plays a huge role. Actually, I believe is the bridge above troubled waters for us in Nigeria. For us to be able to tackle security, all form of security, we need technology. And the basic form of it that we are lacking at this particular point in time is data. We cannot. You can't solve what you don't know. And that's it. The moment you're solving what you don't know, you're actually being disingenuous to yourself and to the people you actually govern. And I don't think we actually have really sat down and looked at security architecture, both from the national level to the local government level and all kind of levels in between. How are we using data? What do we know about security within our confines, within our government, within our communities, within our borders? There's so many good I can be shooting all kind of data to you right now. You'll be shocked. But we need data more than anything else. And the architecture that produces data is lacking. And trust me, I collect data on food and security on a day-to-day basis every single day. It's not cheap. Trust me, like the Americans will say, it ain't cheap. And we have to invest more on it. If you really want to solve this problem, oftentimes when you look at some of these issues, you would think, is it a feature or is it a bug? Because oftentimes you will always attack this thing as a bug, but when you look deeper, you're like, this is looking like a feature. It's like this thing is rather done deliberately. So because the more data you have, the more people are informed, and the more people are informed, the more they're going to challenge what is the status quo. And the more people challenge the status quo, they see the light. The more they see the light, the more people want more for themselves and more for their generation.
Right.
And that's where we are right now. That's the crossroad we find ourselves.
And definitely, it seems most of the economic headwinds we're having, right now, we're not able to sell as much oil as we should, because we've heard the story about oil theft. If they're making wins, with that at this point, because we're trying to ramp up production so we can, getting more revenue and have some more oil to refine, domestically. So a lot to unpack there, but we'll take a break now.
Okay.
When we come back, we're going to break all of that down. Still watching Business Morning on Sunrise Daily.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Well, we're still looking at solving the insecurity problem, so we can have food security and energy security. I still have with me Adebayo here, helping me break down, most of this data. So, definitely is one thing, having data, and it's another thing using it. How can policymakers, make use of all this data and this, technology you have right here?
Absolutely. So what data does is to give you the insight. The more you dig into it, the more you kind of probe the problems. Like I said earlier, one of the stages of solving problem is, what is the problem, and how do I get here, and data give you the insight of it. And what we've discovered, especially we're using this data to be able to shine light, on this, if we kind of break down some of these attributes that we use in calculating these indexes, we're now beginning to see what is actually causing this uprising. Like we did during the 10 days of protest, we found out, some of the data deep diving activities we did on data, we found out that a lot of it actually is based on food insecurity. Because people are hungry. That's why a lot of people are quite easily enticed to go on the street and whatnot. And
we see how that impacts our elections.
Exactly. So you see how these things are so interwoven. So because of food insecurity, affect fiscal security. Because of that fiscal insecurity, affect economic security. Because that affect political security. See how all those human security expressions are all interwoven. That if you solve one, there's high probability that the other one will subside.
Which one should we attack first?
Food is life. Food is life, because if you don't have food, you can't live. So anything else emanates from it. So if you can actually solve the issue of food security. For example, now, one of the things you're going to see in upcoming weeks when we publish the Food Security Index is that in all states of Nigeria, there is no food storage that is owned by the state or the local government. So tell me, if anything happens to a particular state, how can that particular state survive or feed its citizen, or a citizen rather, depending on how you're looking at it? Those are the questions the governors, the leadership of these continuing states supposed to start looking at. How am I going to feed my population? If you cannot feed your population, then how do you energize economic activity in such state? What will now entice investors to come to your state if you cannot even feed your own state? If your state is that prone to all kind of, insecurity. So these are the questions that data actually tells you. These are the answers that data actually, gives you in the process of kind of finding answers to some kind of problem. So, back to your question, using data to probe the problem, and that problem is now given insight. What we are trying to do with Route Watch is to present, using data to present the problem, and let people coming behind us, these are the problems. These are what causes these problems. You have the ability to solve these problems. These are the tools. These are the areas that you need to solve. You have the financial buoyancy and whatnot to solve this problem. Let somebody else come behind us. Once we've kind of expressed the problem and explain what the problem is to them, let people that have the insight that can solve the problem come behind us, such as the government, the policymakers, because this data should help the policymakers as well to be able to enact policies that favors different aspects of the problems being discussed.
Right.
So that is why we can use technology. But again, to collect data, you need technology to collect data. For example,
I'm guessing collecting data is not cheap.
It's very, very expensive. I begin to tell you,
big as Nigeria.
If I begin to tell you to collect data, daily data on food prices in Nigeria, in both formal and informal markets, categorically, without being conservative rather, it's going to cost about 200 million every month. 200 million naira every month to collect data on all 36 states and the federal capital territory on both formal markets and informal markets, and just getting the food prices, because you need those numbers to be able to understand how the prices are moving, the inflection in prices, what is causing the prices. Because funny enough, when anything happens in Nigeria, either the dollar drops or rises or something happens, the fuel subsidies or whatever, the informal market, the prices of food is the first thing that gets that notification, and people will feel it immediately. Actually, it doesn't even last hours. I feel like these people have a WhatsApp group whereby they discuss this.
I think they must have a group.
I'm telling you,
but it's funny how that group does not reflect when prices should actually go down.
Exactly.
The prices don't go down as fast as they rise. So
exactly.
On all of that information.
So it's very critical that we understand how these things are all networked, are all interwoven, because it gives us clarity of thought. So it is important. For example, I just shared with you 200 million naira to collect food data on a day-to-day basis. You really want to have data on how to solve some of these. So imagine a serious government will now look at it. It's like, how can I begin to help? How can I begin to use data to be able to solve some of these problems? These are kind of programmatic spending I have to do, some kind of allocation to be able to do that. And if we are really sincere about our efforts to actually solve this problem, I think it can be done.
It can be done.
It can be done.
We
yes.
put aside a good chunk of money to actually collect, all of that data so that you can have something to, actually work. So, going forward now, what are you seeing for 2025? When you've looked at all of this data, are you seeing improvement, on the radar, or looking at the body language, of this government and also the, non-kinetic? Are you seeing security situation improving?
Yes, in some areas. So if you look at what the military has been doing in the last 6 months, they really wrap up on the kinetic efforts, and that, excuse me, and that has taken out a lot of radicals. So I foresee that, but that particular traction continue to go, and that will kind of dwindle it down. But that's just a bandage. Over the last, if you assess the current administration, over the last 12 months, they've done significant dent from the kinetic point of view of, kind of interdicting a lot of this stuff, getting to the heart of some of these radical communities and kind of disrupting them. They've been able to do that. The effect of that is yet to be seen in large scale of how do they gather, do they regroup, and all those kind of stuff. So that is, we'll continue to monitor that. For the last 12 months, we will continue to monitor, and I foresee this going forward. They will continue that trajectory because the military is really on their heels on that. But now the rest of the MDAs, I really do not, if they don't actually, get their act together, because some of the solutions I see them proposing over the course of time, then it doesn't make sense to me. And I'm just being frank with you, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't show that they genuinely understand the root cause of some of these problems. And if we don't understand the problem, how can you solve a problem you don't understand? That's a question. I'm not trying to be complex in any shape or form. I'm just asking a simple question. How can you solve a problem you don't understand? So if the MDAs are not using their non-kinetic, line of effort from their own, different ministries and agencies to solve security problems, the military will always be at the, brunt end of it. People always they will continue to blame the military.
Right.
Because until I see a lot of actions from these MDAs, like genuine actions towards security measures, I think the status quo will remain the same.
All right, so much to unpack, definitely, and we'll still keep watching and checking out all of this data coming out of Roots Watch. Thank you so much, Adebayo Adeleke, the founder of Roots Watch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
helping us unpack all of this data.
Thank you.